gentlemen. You're all very welcome. A few weeks ago, I mentioned it at the top there, Didi, we were, well, speculating about Mourinho's future. It looked like he was gone. He's still there. What's changed? Has anything changed?
No. No change. He's still there. I think the questions remain the same. They won one game out of the last 6 competitive games. That was against Newcastle, where they were 2-0 down. But he seems to pull out a result every time he's got a back to the wall. Like the Chelsea game, where you think if they get defeated there heavily, maybe with 2-3 goals, that could be the end of it. Then they pull out a result, pull out a performance, probably a bit unlucky in the end not to win the game. And but the questions, as I said, remain the same. Does he get the best out of the players? Are they still behind him? They're 10th in the league, and simply so far it's not been good enough in the Champions League. With a draw against Valencia, they put himself on the back foot, so they can't afford to lose tonight.
Liam, do you agree with that he seems to always be able to, when the back is against the wall, he's able to get a result out of his
Well,
players?
certainly you have to say the Newcastle game, Dara, 2-0 down at half-time against Newcastle, who are not great shakes, and I thought that it was only going to take maybe one surprise defeat or maybe a bad draw against a lower table side might push Woodward and the people at Old Trafford into changing the manager. I still think there's a big question mark, because they're trailing badly, spent a lot of money trailing badly to City, 10th in the league, -1 goal difference. This is not Manchester United, is it? You know, and that half-time scoreline of Valencia winning away to Young Boys really puts some pressure on them to win tonight.
Yeah, it sure does. What's your take on what's happening in that dressing room, Richie? Because, you know, we speculated a lot on, there's various things coming out, you know, that maybe he's lost some of the players and the ones he's been critical of publicly and that sort of thing. But if they're able to go down to Chelsea and nearly win there, to come back from 2-0 down, like, does that suggest that the players are actually playing for him, or are they playing for themselves?
I'm not as convinced as a lot of people are that the reasons they came from 2-0 down to win 3-2 against Newcastle was solely down to the respect or the support that the players have for the manager. There's a load of reasons why you can win a game and why you can pull a performance or result out of somewhere. They're good players, they're good professionals, they're against a team who have beaten nobody. Newcastle haven't won a game in the Premier League this year, so the opposition was awful. I think his situation is as it was 3 weeks ago when we last spoke about him. I don't think he has the support of the people above him at the club. A couple of days after the game against Valencia, there was a leaked report in the English media that he was about to be sacked, and I think he's benefited from the backlash from that. Media, former players and the supporters have come out and spoken quite strongly about how crass it is. For this possibly would have been the 3rd occasion in a row that the club would have informed the media before the manager that he was about to go. So I think he's hanging on by his fingernails, and I don't think his long-term future is stable at all.
But the media report was ultimately wrong for now.
Yeah, I mean, he's still in the job. So we don't know how much of that was true, but for a newspaper to go with something as specific as that, you can be pretty sure their source was pretty solid. But he's still in the job, and I still think all the dressing room issues are the same. He still has the same conflict between the people who are controlling the finances of the club, and still a difference of opinion in how he views players in the transfer market and they do. So the fundamentals are still there. There's still a load of problems.
Liam, you wanted to?
Well, I think he's been a bit more adventurous. When he was 2-0 down against Newcastle, I think he threw caution to the wind, or certainly the way he went down a route that he hasn't liked to go down. So, you know, he's got Mata playing, he's got Rashford playing, he's got Martial. Martial looked like he was well out of favour at the start of the season. All these guys are back in the team and performing, so perhaps he's changed. And the other thing you have to remember, a club like Manchester United would have to have a really important alternative should they get rid of the manager. You
like
can't
a big name.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. You can't just get rid and then not have anything to replace, because let's face it, Mourinho does have huge status in the game.
He certainly does. OK, well, look, let's look at the two teams. Richie, will you talk us through the Manchester United team?
He's gone with the same team that played against Chelsea at the weekend, the same back four. I'm not convinced by that centre-half pairing at all. I don't think Mourinho himself is. He was looking for centre-halves in the summer, and I don't think anyone would disagree with him. In midfield, it's the same Matic and Pogba sitting in front of them. Mata, as Liam said, he's been a bright performer in the last couple of games. Mourinho is hampered a little bit by the amount of players that are unavailable. Sanchez, Fellaini, McTominay, Jones, Lingard, they're all out because of injury, and up front Lukaku leads the line again. He hasn't scored in over a month and isn't coming anywhere near the level of performance that he can, or certainly that he does at international level, so he's just one of the many players who are underperforming at the moment.
Didi, what about the point with Manchester United, which was made after the Newcastle game and also made at Chelsea at the weekend, that some people say that they're only playing really good football when they go behind. Like, start that way, fine, but don't wait till you go behind.
Well, yes, and usually that's a sign of an average team when you start playing when you're behind, because you've got to start games, you've got to control games when it's 0-0, or even when you're winning. And that's certainly not a good sign, because they've been behind in a lot of the games in recent weeks. They've got good players. If you have good players, which they certainly have, you can't help but win games. And the question is, does he win enough games? And does he win it in the style Manchester United fans want to see? And I think the question clearly, or the answer is clearly no, at the moment he doesn't. And whether he can change it after falling out with so many players, because once you lose respect for the manager, it's very hard to get back. And I think there have been so many players who have been upset by some of his comments and remarks, that I'm just not too sure whether he will last there an awful lot longer.
Like, Liam, this is a really serious test against a serious team tonight in Juventus, isn't it?
Yeah, and as you pointed out, Dara, they've won 8 of the 9 games in Serie A. They're only a point or a couple of points ahead of Napoli. Napoli have started well, bit like a similar story to last season, but they're a fine outfit, and they've added again to the squad this summer, especially with Cristiano Ronaldo. You know, he's already started well in the goal-scoring stakes in Italy, and you know, a team like the Juventus can defend. They'll have to defend tonight, especially if Manchester United play the way they have done in recent performances, like the second half against Newcastle and at Chelsea in the second half. Juventus will be asked some questions, but on the other hand, they're a brilliant counter-attacking side, and they have players like Ronaldo on the break. So, you know, this United defence is pretty poor, Dara. It's conceded an awful lot of goals, and they're going to be severely tested tonight.
There's a lot of problems to deal with at the club, a lot of coaching decisions he has to make to improve that United defence, because it's been poor and consistently poor for quite some time now.
And Liam, you know, like we have touched on this issue before. OK, he didn't get the extra defender he wanted in the summer when the transfer window was open. He has to stick with what he's got until January if they are going to back him financially and if he's still there. But like, why isn't he able to improve the players in that defence? Because it doesn't seem like they are improving.
Well, that's the mystery, isn't it? Because as Richie said, Mourinho is well known for his defensive attributes, you know, getting a team set up. And I think, you know, having looked at that side that started the game against Valencia, Sanchez is gone now. I know he's injured, but is he?
Yeah, he's out anyway.
You know, and they've got Rashford coming in. They've got Martial coming in now. Mourinho's been openly critical of these players, but they're in the team now. So I think there's been a U-turn. Mata's in the team. He was out of favour, and he's kind of gone away from the likes of Herrera, who is more defensive-minded in midfield, and he's gone for maybe what the players are looking for, is to play a much more attacking style. And perhaps he's, because of the way things were getting difficult for him, perhaps it's player power, and he's listening to the players, and he's gone for this more offensive style.
OK. Interesting. Didi, we're going to look at the other end of their team now, and Rashford. You know, again, we've heard Mourinho make mixed comments about him in the media. He was great for England against Spain in a wide position. Thoughts on him?
The kid is special, full stop. I think he's got something hardly any player in world football have. He gets a touch lucky, hits a ball into the ground, it goes in. He's got pace to burn. He's got a great first touch. He's a great striker of the ball, which is not usually the case with pacey wingers. And I think his all-round game is excellent. Of course, he has to learn. I think his finishing he can improve. But as I said, he's got everything a top-class winger needs. We talk about Zane, we talk about Sterling, we talk about Salah and Mane at Liverpool. I think the pair they've got is as good as any of these. They haven't shown it yet. This is a part where he has to improve, where he has to work for the team. What Richie showed as well, I think at times this is a lack of discipline. When you don't do your jobs, you're not aggressive enough. Here we see a free kick from a very tight angle, which hits a crossbar. And he's got a great understanding with Martial, which we see here. Here he's got a chance to backheel the ball. This is one part of the game, the decision making, which has to improve. But I think you get this with young players, and also you have to try things, and sometimes they will lose balls.
He hasn't really had Mourinho's confidence, did he?
Well, there was a time last year before the Liverpool game where he got them 2 goals, where he hardly featured for 2 or 3 months. And obviously, for a young player, we know how important confidence. It's everything. If you're not confident, if you haven't got the backing of the manager, it's very hard to perform. And I think this is why we see a very volatile Rashford, Martial, because they don't one week they're in, then they are out for 2 or 3 weeks, and they never really had a run in the team you need. And I think this is why they haven't got the consistency you wish to have.
And his positioning, like we heard, wasn't it Jamie Carragher not so long ago was saying he needs to leave to get more minutes on the field because he needs to be a number 9. He's not going to be a number 9 while Lukaku is there. Do you like him in a wide position, or would you rather him in the centre?
Well, I think Lukaku is a much better number 9 than Rashford. I think he can play in that position. I'm not sure whether he can play right now for Manchester United as a number 9. Maybe in 2 or 3 years' time he can. And I think the position he plays at the moment, where he comes wide, either from the left or the right, where he cuts inside, I think is probably at the moment his best position. And
this fella, you've mentioned him already. He's hit a rich vein of form, or he did in London.
Well, they paid a couple of years ago. They paid an awful lot of money for that guy, and again, he's a game changer. There's not too many players in world football who can beat players with their skill, with their flashes of brilliance, with their pace. He can, and I think in the last 3 weeks he showed what he's capable of. Not the best finish, but the follow-up from Herrera is in. He uses his body well, and he's very direct. He strikes the ball with both feet. He's quick. He's sometimes his decision-making, as we said with Rashford, I think it's similar with him. His decision-making sometimes does let him down, but I think you do get that with young players. But again, I think Martial and Rashford are, I'd probably say, in the top 6 or 7 of wingers in world football.
In the world?
Yeah, I think the reason this is one part of his game where he has to improve, because he runs into 4 defenders. You just have to realise when you have to pass the ball, when you run with the ball. I think the way Manchester United play doesn't really suit them all the time, because at Manchester City, the wingers, there's a lot of possession. And a lot of the time it depends when you give these players the ball, because the earlier you give them the ball, once they start running at defenders, it's very hard to stop them. And I don't think they get the balls as early as maybe a Liverpool player or a Salah or a Sterling at Manchester City does, because of the way they play.
I don't know if you're surprised at that. Since he joined in 15, you can see Martial is Manchester United's top goal scorer in that, well, over 3-year period.
Yeah,
40 goals.
And I think it's quite a good ratio. Rashford 1 in 4, Martial 1 in 3.5. And this is from guys who play out wide and who didn't really have the backing for a certain length of time of the manager. So I don't think the numbers are a lot better than I thought they would be. And I think that just goes to show how good these guys are and how even better they could be.
Young players need and deserve the confidence of the manager. And up till recently, they haven't had that. He's put these guys under pressure. They've turned the corner a bit, these 2 guys. And recently, Rashford got a couple of goals for England against Spain. And another player is Mata, who hasn't enjoyed the confidence of Mourinho. And we haven't got a lot to show, because simply he hasn't played him. He didn't fancy him at Chelsea. But now, with the way things are going, he's back in the team. And one of the goals that Rashford scored in that little clip there was a brilliant ball from Mata with the outside of his left foot. He's the most creative midfield player. And they finally found a place for him. He's come on a sub here against Bern in the very first game of the qualifiers, and he's gone close there with. He can score goals, he can make goals. I thought he was outstanding at Chelsea. at the weekend, and he's in the team now because we don't know.
Yeah.
Is it the player saying we want him in the team? He gives us the best options to create, and he's a big player in this game tonight. If they're going to open a Juventus team that prides themselves on a brilliant defence, they're going to need Mata at his very best.
Like there's other things, Richie, going on at Manchester United. Luke Shaw with a new 5-year contract. Like again, I suppose if you think of all the players that Mourinho has sort of come out against in the media, he was top of the list. Now, he came back really trim after the summer. He took up the challenge and all that, no matter how hard it was. But a 5-year contract, like who signed off on that?
What puzzles me is, you're right to say he's top of the list of players you think of that Mourinho has come out and publicly criticised, but that list is long, and I don't know why he does this. I don't know why he feels the need to come out and make snide remarks or very critical remarks of the players that he's going to rely on week in, week out. I think the team he's chosen tonight, I don't think he'd much room for manoeuvre. I think, like Liam said, he's taken Herrera out and Matt has gone in, which is an attacking change, but with the absence of Lingard and Fellaini and Sanchez, I don't think he had any other really options than to play the players he's got. The ones he has, like the lads have said, the confidence has been an issue for some of them because they haven't had a consistent run of game time. They haven't reached anywhere near their potential, and they have a manager who publicly, and I assume privately, is difficult to deal with because of what he says about them.
Well, Didi, that I know a few months ago talking to Damien Duff, who played for Mourinho, and he did similar to him, not to Luke Shaw proportions, but this was Damien's take on it was, you know, this is to see if you've got the character and you can stand up and withstand this kind of thing, that it's a test of character. Yeah,
but this is probably, how long are we going back? 12 years? 15 years?
Yeah. 15 years, yeah.
15 years. Now, this is a different time. This is a different generation of players, and what worked 15 years ago is not certain to work 15 years after, and I think that's most of the issue. I think in management, I think in the last few years, the managers who are successful have adapted to the new generation of players. I'm not sure whether this manager has. And as I said before, if you have good players, you can't help but win games. But clearly they don't win enough. And if you have players like Martial and Rashford and Mata, or especially Martial and Rashford, you've got to use them. And the way he did play it at Chelsea was a counter-attacking style. If you've got these players, you need to get them on the ball. And I think that's part of the problem. Sometimes the style of play, the way they played, they just didn't have enough time on the ball. And when they did get the ball, I think they got the ball in positions where they couldn't be dangerous.
When you think of his handling of players, forget the off-the-field stuff for the comments. If you look at many players and their performances, the list of players that you could say are thriving under Mourinho's coaching, or are improving, or are noticeably better players, or more rounded players, or playing at a higher level, I can't think of many. I can't think of what he does. And like I said a few weeks ago, if you're defending Mourinho and you're really pushing for him to remain as the manager of the club, what exactly are you pushing for? Is it his coaching, or his handling his players? Is it his style of football, his dealings in the transfer market, his handling in the media, the directors? In all of those areas, you sit there and go, why is he behaving in this way?
That's his way. That's his style. That's what he's always done.
I know. But there was a different era or different time, and exactly what happens now is exactly the opposite to what used to happen. Because when it was at Chelsea, I think all of these players were at the peak of their powers. There weren't many players who left Chelsea and performed better than they did for him or under him at Chelsea.
Before the season started, we all read it, there was leaks from someone within the hierarchy of the club to the media explaining in detail who Mourinho wanted to sign and why they didn't think he should be signed. So it's a really public undermining of his input as manager or his power within the club. So that situation, I can't imagine, has changed. You're asking earlier what's changed in the last few weeks. I don't believe that's changed in any way. And you're trying to assess from a distance the morale of the dressing room or what confidence or support the players have in Mourinho. I don't think his management style has changed in 2 weeks. I think he's still confrontational and goes about the job in unnecessary ways, in ways that aren't getting the best out of this group of players, which is the fundamental role of a manager.
It's, let's use that word again, complex, Liam. His relationship with that club, how he's managing the team.
He's a happier guy in recent weeks because they were 2 down against Newcastle at home and it looked all over. You know, as we said, Newcastle, very, very poor team. They lost at home to Brighton at the weekend. So it was nothing wonderful what Manchester United did, but Mourinho could finally give his support to the players, and he's given his support to the players after the Chelsea game, and he's picked the same team, a very attacking team, but they're up against one of the best sides in Europe, and a side that can also hit them on the break with Cristiano Ronaldo up front. So I think we're in for an absolutely fascinating game.